early days yet, but Chad
Yeah.
and team are
Great. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Employee recognitions.
Well, can you all believe it? 5 years since Robert came on board here. As many of you know, we stole Robert from the, oh, he's back there. Robert from the city of Oceanside 5 years ago. And I gotta say, he's made a tremendous impact on our operations department. The morale of the group has improved, the functionality of the group has improved tremendously. And he's been able to maneuver some challenges out there, but also keep the team functioning at a high level and really has done a great job. So it's been a blessing to me to have somebody, as a former operations manager myself, to have somebody take it over to where I don't have to worry about it. I can't say the same for his predecessors. So it's been a blessing to me, and I'm sure it'll be a blessing to Jake as well. So with that, I want to give Robert his large 5-year plaque.
If you don't mind, I'd say too, just as I was kind of onboarding here, got to sit down for a couple of tacos with Robert on a Friday, and really left that, we had a good hour and a half conversation. I'd left that meeting kind of inspired, coming here, just realizing, wow, there's some great staff here, and kind of got me excited to join the team. So thank you, Robert. And I told him that already.
Item number 16, approval of the minutes for the August 22nd board meeting and the September 6th special board meeting.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Moved by Director Johnson, seconded by Director Mack. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 17, Board of Directors comments and reports. President's report. I have nothing to report at this time. Representative report from San Diego County Water Authority.
So the summary of the board meeting from last month is on there. But the one I want to talk about today was the Water Authority retreat that happened on September 7th. It was held over at Quail Gardens Botanical Center near there, one of the old nurseries, and they have an area there. And the topic of the day was for the third-party water transfers. During the last round of 2021, the long-range financing plan, the city of San Diego, recognizing that pure water is going to diminish the water authority's demand, said, hey, we got to figure out what we do with all this extra water. And so they've asked the water authority to develop a third-party transfer analysis. This is the long-awaited outcome of that. They were supposed to go over it a couple of months ago, but they got tied up in a certain closed session about a certain LAFCO process, and took so much time that they decided to cancel the rest of the meeting and do it again another time. So it was interesting. The first part of the morning had a discussion on the analysis that was done. They brought in 2 consultants that have worked together in the past. One of whom happens to be the spouse of Director Townsend Smith, Dr. Rodney Smith, and Bob Campbell who's a long time. Some of the people in the room probably remember Bob Campbell from the back in the day, worked for Met for many years, and then the Water Authority. I think he retired over 20 years ago, but he still does water resource consulting. Couple of key points on their analysis. Right out the gate, probably the second or third slide, Bob Campbell got up there and said, we've analyzed the situation. We find no scenario where the water authority goes below their take or pay numbers. At which point I was happened to be sitting next to Matt Vespi, who's the CFO of the city of San Diego. People looking like, what did he just say? What did he just say? Because the water authority is within 10% of their take or pay supplies right now with their current demands, which was kind of startling. And it generated quite a bit of discussion later on when the Q&A part happened. For his part, Dr. Smith got up to talk about the different types of options and the QSA contracts and whatnot. And even though he was part of the team that came up with the concept that there's no scenario where they go below take or pay, which is mind-boggling, he did say now is the time to start getting into negotiations, and recommended that the Water Authority try to establish, if they can't change the QSA, to find some other partners within the Met service area to have option contracts ready to go should that occur. And I agree with his analysis there. I think they should have done that years ago, because the time when the day comes that you're below your take or pay numbers and you go trying to seek a partner, then they got you under their thumb, because you're
Yes.
pretty well already screwed yourself up. And one of the things I made sure to ask the questions for them to clarify for the rest of the board. And there's quite a few new board members. There's a lot of board members there where they ask who's been here under 2 years. It's like 30% of them under 2 years on the board, which is difficult because it's hard to come up to speed on this board, as I'm sure Director Johnson knows, and Director Johnson Smith. It's hard. The water authority gets even more complicated. I did at one point out to, because when they were saying this stuff about there's no scenario where we're going to go below the take or pay. I informed the new board members, you're being gaslit right now. So just make sure you understand that, because that's just nonsense. And Dan Denham, the new GM, kind of came around to that because it was all they're using urban water management plan numbers. Those are never not quite right. And but the end result of Dr. Smith telling them that they should start working on transfer agreements now was good advice. Whether they take the advice or not, I'm not sure. So it was a strange day, but as we've talked about before, and as I've said here at this board many times, saying they're still forecasting too high. And when this meeting started and they're saying there's no possibility or no future scenario that they could see, that's still somebody who's got their head in the sand. And I hope that they can change that. That's my report.
Thank you. CSDA.
Yes, last month, the CSDA had their fall conference in Monterey. And the highlight for me was we have 2 employees here that gave classes. One was Tom Kennedy and the other one was Robert. And the one Robert did was on leadership, and it was quite interesting. The class was totally packed. I believe there's even standing room. And it was interesting because the interaction of the audience with Robert and another gentleman, I think his name was Steve, I think. And some people actually question Robert on his leadership, on some of his ideas. And he really came back with some really good answers, and it was really good. His answers made, I think, a lot of people in the room think. And as Robert was saying, there's really no right or wrong. But that was a very good, I was proud of the 2 employees here.
He drew more people than I did. Nobody wanted to hear him.
I was there in the front row, cheer you on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was really good. And again, I was proud of I thought both gentlemen did very excellent to represent the quality of personnel we have in here in Rainbow. So that's it.
Thank you. LAFCO.
I had my last LAFCO Special District Advisory Committee meeting, not last Friday, the Friday before. So I have to resign my seat as I'm retiring. And so exactly how they go about the replacement, it's not our decision how to replace it. They'll talk to their member agencies. I think in the interim, the chair of that committee can recommend a replacement to the executive officer, but at some point they'll probably put it back out at the next round of elections. So it's been my honor to represent the district and also the special districts around the county on that seat for almost 8 years now. But I going downtown to sit through long meetings on some LAFCO matters is that won't be missed as much.
Santa Margarita Watershed Water Master Steering Committee meets next month. Nothing has occurred since July. Aqua.
Yeah, few items, the Aqua 2023 Fall Conference and Expos at Indian Wells on November 28th through 30th. There were some, I guess, bills that the news is positive for water districts. AB 560, which was looking to try and get the State Water Control Board, Resource Board, to look at proposed settlement agreements before it went to the court. So getting into our knickers. got moved to a 2-year bill. So that was a kind of positive development. See, the State Water Resources Control Boards initiated some formal rulemaking for making conservation a California way of life. They're holding a public hearing on October 4th. Written comments are due on the 17th. And you can look at their, aqua.com/resources page if you want to make comments. Last thing I was going to mention is, a couple things. Orange County Water District captured 2.56 inches of rain, increasing the water storage behind Prado Dam. That was like 10,500 acre feet from the, Hurricane Hillary.
Oh.
That would just about have taken care of our district.
Yeah.
We had that capability.
Yeah.
And, I think those are the kind of storage facilities that we need to,
Good luck building
Keep
a
an
dam in
interest
San Diego
in.
County. man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
On
right.
a river.
yeah. Last but not least, County Water Authority, Dan Denham and Trish Burge and Kelly Gage all made the page on the Aqua newsletter.
Cool.
That's it.
Meetings, workshops, committee seminars, et cetera, reports by directors, AB 1, 2, 3. Any reports on the seminar? Any other attendees to the CSDA?
I also attended Monterey and also attended the 2 sessions that we had our staff present. Very impressive, very professionally done. Also, I was able to attend other seminars regarding board members. So it was a very worthwhile conference. So thank you for allowing me to attend.
Thank you. Anyone else? Directors' comments. Any directors have any comment?
I do.
Okay.
I would like to thank Chad Williams yesterday. The engineering and CIP program manager took me to see the beginning of Bonzo Oaks. It's not really the beginning, it's been already occurring, but it was very good to see in our Division 1, a very large project being done with a great deal of detail for future development for the water and the wastewater. So very nice. Thank you, Chad, for taking the time. Also, we went by to see Ocean Breeze, the potential of that development in Division 1. Very different. That's a well-developed area already. And so it's a very historical and valued place in our Division 1. So that was excellent for me to see that as well. Also, I'd like to report that this Thursday, I will have the honor of meeting with Kathleen Harp, who is the Administrative Services Manager in her department, to learn more about all the work that they do within that department here at Rainbow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got a comment. So I wanted to thank Robert for the weekly report he's been sending out.
Mhm. Yeah.
I took the blurb on the line failure that took place over the weekend, and I pushed it out on neighborhoods. So, the word could get out there. We got some transparency and some insight for the community. Understand, you guys are working on the weekends. So good job. Thanks.
I'll add a little side comment on Julie's comment, which was, she was telling me earlier, she's lived in the area 30 years and she finally got onto vessels and got to see it.
When the gate
ranch.
opened, Julie goes, "This is so exciting."
It's like going through the Golden Gate, whoa. That really, I shared with my family last night, this experience, because my 2 sons grew up in this area.
Mm.
And one had a classmate there and he says, "Oh, Mom, it took you this long to see the place." And I could have taken it, but thank you. It was far more beautiful than I had even ever imagined.
If you go in Don's office, see a picture of
Yep.
her and a family that they allowed the district to go in there and with their families to get
Yeah.
Yeah.
photographs taken about, what was that, 5 or 6 years ago?
For a while, they were doing weddings and things.
Yeah. Beautiful place.
Legal counsel comments.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did a written report and update on a new case before the United States Supreme Court involving public officials and social media. In this case, the parents they sued school district board members for blocking them on social media. The board members used their personal Facebooks and Twitter accounts to block them. But then the parents sued, arguing that by blocking them, it violated their First Amendment, that as district board members, they're public officials, and the page accordingly constituted what they call a public forum, which would trigger 42 USC section 1983, which is the code section providing civil relief to people who were deprived of rights by a public official. So the board members responded, this is not a violation. This is our personal page. These parents were involved in disruptive behavior. At one point, one of the parents posted 226 identical posts to the board members' Twitter page within 10 minutes. That's dedication, right? But the Ninth Circuit still ruled in favor of the parents. They found it was, even though it was a quote unquote personal page, they said it was a public forum under this law because these particular board members were using the pages for posts related to board activities like public comment, announcements, soliciting public feedback, that sort of thing for their work at the district. And then the Ninth Circuit also noted that if a board member uses the page for a public purpose, the director should have basically guidelines or some type of rules of decorum, what's permissible, what's not. You can box up if it's repetitive or irrelevant, or kind of have size guidelines, or specifying what the relevant subject matter is, so it can be applied uniformly and reasonably. So the board members disagreed. They filed a petition before the United States Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court accepted certiorari. They said there's a split among the circuits. So some agree with the Ninth Circuit, like the Second Circuit, the Fourth Circuit, and the Eighth Circuit. They go into this content-based approach that the Ninth Circuit used when whether you have reasonable uniform guidelines and applied it. Whereas other districts like the Sixth Circuit, they use a much more narrow test. They don't go into the content. They look at it as whether the page uses what they call governmental authority or governmental duty. So if it was an official district page, or if it was a page that the board approved, then it would trigger that statute. So that's what the Supreme Court is going to consider. I want to give an update on that. It's kind of an this evolving area of law, districts and First Amendment and the Brown Act and what you can do, what you can't do. Remember, there was that law reported on, I think it was like a year or two ago, that passed that said, board members, if you're on social media under the Brown Act, you can't even, basically or use some sort of what they call a digital icon expressing a reaction to another member's post, because they said it's essentially a deliberation. So it's really interesting that just the risk of discussing district business on personal pages, and a reminder that, if there is that kind of discussion, to be very careful, if you delete or block someone, because then it could trigger all of these issues. That concludes my report, unless there are any questions.
Great. Appreciate it, Alfred. Always learn from your reports.
Oh, thank you.
Committee reports, Budget and Finance did not meet, is that correct? Was it? Okay. Flint, Engineering and Operations?
Mr. President, members of the board, you are correct. Budget and Finance did not meet. Tracy and her crew are deep in the weeds on the audit, and I'm hoping that in early October we'll have a meeting, and I suspect that we'll be getting a very, very positive result from the audit due to Tracy's and her team's work. So that's where we are. Budget, Engineering and Operations, we met on Wednesday, September the 6th. And the highlight of that is that you have two items, numbers 26 and 27 on your agenda today, that were brought to the committee, and the committee, after some discussion, unanimously voted to recommend that you move those items forward. So 26 and 27. And last but not least, we had a presentation on something that I had never heard of before called microplastics. And I was educated on what microplastics are. And the idea was to give water districts some information about it so that if they received inquiries from the public, we would be able to respond appropriately. And I don't know if any of you know what microplastics are, but they apparently exist in just about everything: the food we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe, stuff that we touch. And it is not known medically whether they cause any problems for human beings or not. But they are apparently synthetic and foreign substances that exist. And so we had a presentation on that, and received the consultants' thoughts on how we would respond to public inquiries about it. That's all we have. Thanks.
Thank you. Communication and customer services? You would. Thank you, Carleen.
The committee reviewed the logo that the district, that the board approved at our last board meeting. We talked about our plan for the rollout. We're going to do kind of a soft rollout. So we've ordered new apparel for team members that was due to be reordered anyway, that we order annually. We're working on updating all of our digital assets and things that don't cause an upfront, cash outflow. We're going to pause on doing things like the truck logos and things that would cost a little bit more. So we'll just do a gradual soft rollout. Josh gave an update on the customer service metrics, and they're still doing a great job of keeping our hold times low, close to the 30-second mark. So they're doing great there. And then there were lots of media reports that came out in the previous month related to the LAFCO decision and the lawsuits and all of that. So there was a large pile of of reports that Tom had been quoted in, and video reports and things like that. So
Didn't we also have the customer services report on the response times and things?
yeah,
Oh,
so the response times are still really, really good
Good.
compared to what previous years have been. The average hold time used to be around 90 seconds, and it's hovering right around 30 seconds. So they're doing a really great job.
Great. Thank you, Carleen. Presentations, Congressman Issa's office, Alan Pelicani.
Yeah, we're lucky
Alan?
to have Alan here with us. I know Alan and Meg and I went on a tour a couple months back, and I'm sure Alan has some awesome news for us today.
I hope so. Mr. President, board members, thank you.
Does it
guys.
involve money? Out of here.
Well, that is our relationship, I guess. I'll just leave it at that. But there's a lot of different ways I thought about going about this and how I wanted to come and present to you guys. And a little while back, I got wind that a certain general manager, Mr. Tom Kennedy, was retiring. And so I thought long and hard about how I wanted to properly celebrate this and give a good congratulations. But our congressional district that Congressman Issa represents and that I go around every day, a large part of it are communities just like Fallbrook, just like Rainbow, where oftentimes you feel overlooked for the bigger cities in your counties. And so in light of that, you need people who are going to represent you strong. You need people who are going to be a fighter for you every single day that they come into the office. And, a few months ago, I heard about some constituents with water rates feeling like they were getting undercut. And so I reached out to a general manager, Mr. Tom Kennedy. I was like, hey, can you brief me a little bit on what's going on with this LAFCO situation, all of this? And Tom goes, you know what? Why don't you come up here and I'll show you? And that day proved to me just how impactful and important Mr. Kennedy is to not only, the people in this room, but every ratepayer that he represents, and that every single day when he came into the office, he was going to fight for his constituents and his ratepayers. And so I really wanted to make this something special and to honor you and to say congratulations on your retirement. So I brought for you, and I hope this isn't like echoing or anything. I brought for you a flag that was flown over the United States Capitol and a certificate to go along with it. Yeah, so I'll present that to you. I'll leave you with the box as well if you want to take the box too. But that is for you, flown over the Capitol and then a certificate to go along with it. You
Fantastic.
can honor it. But
I appreciate
congratulations.
that.
Thank you so
Above and
much. And
beyond.
on behalf of everyone, thank you so much for
Oh.
everything you've done.
You get a picture?
Oh,
That is amazing. Well, I also want to say, Alan and his boss, were instrumental in helping us achieve a 1.67 million dollar federal grant. It's not often. I've been known to complain bitterly here that our state and federal governments are much better at taking water money out of our region than bringing it back. But Alan and the team at ICE's office got it done. I mean, right there in an appropriation in a federal bill for a little rainbow water, which makes a huge difference because that's $1.7 million. It doesn't have to come out of the pockets of our ratepayers, and we really appreciate your work. And I know that Jake will be as good or better servant to the community than I am. So you got to keep in touch with him. So thank you. This is awesome.
Thank you.
I'll apply it out.
Woo.
thank you guys, and thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you, Alan.
No, that
Nice surprise.
was-
Yeah.
Groundwater study presentation, which I think we kicked you out of the last meeting. I apologize.
Yeah, and
For more.
before Amanda gets going, I just want to give some of the background. You know, when I first started here, there was already a contract out with West Yost to study this project, and that study wrapped up with some ambiguous results, and it didn't show too much promise. But the board wanted to keep studying it. It was part of our strategic plan. It's always been that way, and so we crafted this current project to build on the West Yost study, and then also build into the contract off ramps. The board wanted to have, because it was expensive, the total contract's like $1.2 million just to study this thing. And so we built in off ramps so that we can, as we go through, find places to where we bring back to the board to make decisions on where to go to the next step or how to go to the next step. And so we're at one of those inflection points right now. And so Chad will clean up whatever I didn't clean up properly here, and then introduce Amanda to give the presentation.
Thank you. So this presentation has been given to the Engineering and Operations Committee. Hoke Consulting and their team, many of whom are in the room. Amanda's going to do the introductions. We have several consultants joining us via Zoom today.
Oh.
So as Amanda goes through this, I'm going to steal one from Tom. Caution, there will be a lot of math in the presentation. But the engineering style, and Amanda's worked very hard on this, is we really do want it to be interactive. This is intended as informational only for the board today. And then at a later board meeting, whether it be October or December, I will work with Jake and the rest of the board on when that comes. We will bring an action item if we're going to take this off ramp or not. So Amanda's going to get started, and then immediately following it, we have Doug Gillingham and his team also in attendance, and he is going to piggyback. So if it appears that Amanda's going to gloss over, she's going to talk about that because Doug's going to really dive into the weeds on that. And with that, I turn it over to Amanda.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, members of the board, and welcome Jake to the team. My name is Amanda Parra, and I'm the project manager for the San Luis Rey Groundwater Recovery Project. And today's presentation, we have the Hoke Consulting team, who's the prime consultant on this project, supporting us here. So Adam Hoke, Sarah Davis, and Carrie Dale. And then attending via Zoom, we have our sub-consultants, Geoscience, Woodard and Curran, and Trussell's Technologies. Before I get started on the presentation, I do want to caveat this, that this is a very technical presentation. So please stop me along the way, ask questions if you need additional clarification. Either myself, Tom and Chad, or our team of consultants can help provide additional clarification. So for the feasibility study itself, the main purpose of this project and the main goal of the project is to diversify Rainbow's diversify Rainbow's water supply. That being said, part of diversifying the water supply is finding a local water supply that we can can tap. So for the feasibility study objectives itself, there's a handful of items that we will cover, but ultimately the first key objective is to perform a technical evaluation to better understand the existing conditions of the river valley. Then we segue into the environmental and regulatory requirements, getting a better understanding of how those elements would impact the planning, design, and construction of a treatment facility, as well as some of the required permits and required conditions associated with implementing a project of this magnitude. And we transition into investigating various project options, as well as understanding the economics. And then lastly, exploring various funding opportunities. As you'll find, as we get towards the end of the presentation, both the pumping aspect of the project as well as the treatment facility does come with a pretty hefty price tag. So this funding opportunity is just a segue into the level of work that needs to take place going forward for us to kind of better position ourselves for this project. For the feasibility study itself, these are some of the items that the presentation will cover. Starting off with the ground model update, we'll look at some of the factors that have changed historically within the river valley. We'll discuss the 2016 West Yost feasibility study that Tom had briefly touched on, and how the current feasibility study has made modifications to that and enhanced our understanding of recharge rates, possible safe yields, and allowable yield for pumping the groundwater basin. And then we'll touch on project considerations, things like water quality, site suitability, the environmental aspects of the project, how those ultimately affect the time, budget, and the schedule of the project. And then lastly, project options A and B. We'll dive into the details a little bit and give just a general understanding of the alignment, placement of the treatment facility, and then we'll jump into the costs. So for the background itself, as Tom has mentioned, the district did perform a feasibility study back in 2016. The purpose of the study was, one, to get a general understanding of the existing conditions and the feasibility of implementing pump wells as well as a treatment facility. West Yost, in their report, did find that the average recharge rate for the San Luis Rey groundwater basin was about 7,200 to 7,600 acre feet per year. So that established ultimately the criteria of how much we would be able to extract, and then ultimately back into designing a project that fell within that allotted amount. So for the annual pumping rates, it was determined that 5,700 acre feet could be pumped from the groundwater basin without having significant impacts on both the groundwater basin itself and also the surrounding private well owners. And then lastly, as I mentioned, West Yost backed into developing a conceptual groundwater extraction and treatment project using a 4,000 acre feet per year extraction capability. So since then, there's been a lot of additional information provided on the district's legal rights. There's been both challenges and opportunities for the district as it relates to identifying additional funding for the project. So the project was put on hold and has now been reinitiated as of last year. So with that being said, within that time frame where the project was on a standstill between 2016 to 2022, there's been a lot of changes that have taken place within the San Luis Rey River Valley. That being said, those changes have ultimately changed the recharge rates, our safe yield amounts for the groundwater basin, and ultimately would dictate our ability to extract a specific amount of water from the basin itself. So things like land use, changes in return flow, and also customer water reductions are all factors that will ultimately impact the outcome of our treatment facility and the amount of potable water that this project will yield. So for the return flow estimate factors, I put this diagram up here just to provide kind of general overview of how the recharge process works. So the arrows on the left of the diagram, so the yellowish orange arrows, those are all of your outflow factors. So that's when water is being extracted from the basin, either related to pumping, evapotranspiration, and other factors. We have the arrows on the right, which are your inflow factors. So things like stream bed percolation, subsurface inflow from Paula, applied water and septic. Those are all factors that are recharging the groundwater basin. So we have our inflow, we have our outflow. Although it is a simple process to understand that, but there's the other layers within the basin, the project considerations, project yield, water quality, environmental permitting requirements that complicate things a little bit more. So we'll touch on those items a little bit more, but ultimately, these are all factors that need to be considered when we're considering both the inflow and the outflow factors of the basin. So for the groundwater model update, what Hoke Consulting ended up doing was they used the 2016 data set, which ranged from, was a 30-year data set. Hoke Consulting took it one step further, added an additional 40 years. So they looked at an enhanced data set of approximately 70 years, ranging from 1947 to 2021. This figure here shows the extent of the contributing watershed area and then narrows down our study area to just the groundwater model area. So let me see if I can, this pointer here. Okay, so it is the, I'll do my best to describe this here. Thank you, Ahmed. So this black box here, the rectangular box, is going to be our study area. It's important to note that the gray outer limits are the entire watershed area. However, we've just, for the sake of our study, have focused along the San Luis Rey River, both the upstream portions as well as the downstream portions. So as part of the groundwater model update, we looked at land use trends, again, ranging from 1947 all the way to 2021. Some of the key snapshot years that stood out where there being major changes in land use trends were at 86, 90, 95, 2000, 2008, and 2019. Part of those changes was primarily the conversion of agricultural land to commercial and residential land. The gray area at the top of the bars does depict the open space. So these are areas like preserve land, mitigation lands that we're not going to see quite a bit of changes in those areas, but ultimately the key trend that we're seeing here is the conversion of ag to commercial, which then ultimately affects the need for imported water use. It's important to note here that our progress from 2016 to 2023, there was a significant coordination with our legal counsel as well as Paula Tribes to better understand the district's legal rights and what water we're entitled to when we're extracting water from the groundwater basin. And we are only allowed to extract the amount of imported water that goes into the basin. And so why I mention this as it relates to this slide is because as the land use trends are changing, our water supply, our need for imported water use is also changing as well. And we'll see that in some of the other figures. So the groundwater model also looked at private well inventory within the study area. We looked at a data set from the County of San Diego groundwater study, which ranged from 1980 to 2010. One of the sub-consultants did extensive work in this area and had some additional data sets from 1960. So we they helped fill in the gaps and develop a more comprehensive data set. So altogether, the blue dots are reflective of a data set ranging from 1960 to 2010.
Amanda, to clarify on this one, these are people who have pulled well permits on record at the County of San Diego, which is an important factor. There could be many other wells out there that are not.
Yes.
Legally they're permitted to be there.
Yes, and they all have associated well log inventories associated with them because they are permitted. So thank you, Chad.
I'd also add that just because a well is permitted by the county does not necessarily mean it has water rights within the yellow bulletin 118 area of the lower San Luis Rey groundwater basin. And an important distinction that could come up later in these projects.
Then we also looked at imported water suppliers. So within the contributing watershed area, so within that gray boundary, there are 3 water districts that are importing water and servicing or recharging the basin in this area, those being Fallbrook, Rainbow, and Valley Center. So we looked at imported water deliveries to figure out what the theoretical demand would be over an extended period of time. That being said, we looked at all of the imported water use for the various agencies and came up with an historical average of about 11,600 acre feet per year. This is ranging from 47 again to 2021. Within the last 5 years, the average acre feet was about 7,200. And then for 2021, it dropped a little bit more, and now we're averaging about 7,100 acre feet per year of annual imported water use recharging the basin. So key takeaway here, you'll see the red arrow. It does indicate a trend line, which is on the decline. This is important again because we're only allowed to extract the amount of water that we put into the basin. So again, the demand is decreasing, then ultimately we're only allowed to extract that limited amount that we put in. Another factor to consider here is that when we dive into the details of this project a little bit more, the approximate time frame to go from planning a project this complexity and this magnitude to implementation, we're looking at approximately a 10-year time frame. So that's something to keep in mind. Just within a 5-year, let alone a 1-year change, there has been a change in the average amount of water that we're using from all agencies. So put that into perspective in a 10-year time frame, and there's a probability that this number will continue to decline. So the overall results for the updated groundwater model are shown here. Key takeaways: the return flow amounts have declined. The amount of return flow available from 2016 to 2023 have declined. And then ultimately, because that amount of return flow has declined, then that has resulted in the proposed project pumping amounts to decline as well. You'll see for the HOKE 2023, the 3277 acre feet per year. This is the proposed project pumping amount. This doesn't necessarily reflect the potable water delivery amount, which there is some loss in treatment, which we'll dive into a little bit more, but just something to keep in mind that 3,200 acre feet per year, realistically, we'd get anywhere, I think it came to about 2,600 of potable water that would be produced by pumping this amount.
Amanda, a quick question. If I'm reading this chart correctly, if we had built a facility in 2016 at 4,000 acre feet a year, we would have to be operating it at a lower capacity, correct?
Correct.
Great question. And
Your mic's on.
it's on. Great question. And it goes to what Amanda was saying. We start today, if the board gave direction to go today and we're planning 10 years out, the design process, what are you trying to construct when you go online? That is the $100 million
Question.
But even at that
The second,
3,200 square or 3,200 acre feet, that would be about 25% of our of what we're using. So
true, but
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
you have is a plant that has the capacity to operate.
Yeah.
Is only operating at about 80% of its capacity,
right.
75% of its
Right.
capacity.
Yeah.
treatment plants are like
Yeah.
high-end cars.
Yeah.
Do not like to be idled low.
Well,
Yeah.
They want
yeah.
a ramp where they're at absolute spot.
Second question, when you talk about recharge rates in the previous slide, how do you get the recharge rate just at a high level? I mean, what is Rainbow doing to inject water into the ground?
You are at your house. He is at his house.
that right?
He is at his house. Septic is a
So
large
septic.
component of it.
Okay, so it's
Agricultural use does as well, but we tried to discount that because avocado does push a lot of
Oh,
water.
water
the root
through,
zone,
yeah.
But they're on the decline. And so you don't want to make capital investments based on that.
Yeah.
But septic return flow is steady. Somebody's gonna be flushing at your house forever. And it's actually very easy to calculate because it's very direct. It's designed to put it in the ground and not evapotranspirate. It's got to go deep. So
Okay,
that's a bulk of it right now is septic.
just a point of clarification is, where is that water coming from?
And
My toilet. Okay, thank.
Rancho. Other project,
Crop swap.
but that also is not gonna be producing any water. We're using,
It's designed to reduce.
Reduce
the
your
impact of
water
that's
water
used,
use.
reduced water.
Right.
Okay,
But septic return flow is more stable
so that's it.
because they're unlikely to build a sewer main up Olive Hill to serve your house and Jake's house. It's just not feasible or economical.
Now that we touched on the groundwater model updates, I'd just like to go over some of the project considerations. Specifically factors that will affect either the timing of the project as well as the budget of the project. And they're key considerations that are in the forefront of ultimately dictating the direction of the project. So one of those being water quality. So we have the way that treatment plants are set up is their treatment means are set up to follow state and regulatory limits. So those are the maximum contaminant levels. For the sake of this project, we looked at surrounding treatment plants and have decided to use the Skinner water treatment plant as the ideal means for treatment. So the water quality targets for implementing and kind of incorporating those standards in our water treatment facility. That being said, if there are changes to any of these water constituents from chloride, iron, manganese, and so forth, if the states and feds decide to make modifications to those regulatory limits, then ultimately it would change our means of treatment as well. And the reason why I mention this is because it actually segues very nicely into the two other items that I'm going to discuss here. So the other factor we have is total dissolved solids. So we found that the more, let's see, the higher you go upstream, so the Paula area, the lower total dissolved waters, the total dissolved solids, the more west you go towards Oceanside, the higher total dissolved solids. And what this means for treatment is if we end up placing a treatment plant where there's higher TDS, that means it's more expensive to treat the water. So ultimately, the sweeter the water, the best place for a treatment plant is going to be more towards the Paula area. And then there's another constituent, PFAS, which has been a buzzword in the water agency, but another factor ultimately impacting water quality is PFAS, and it's known as a long-lasting chemical. It's found in things like water, air, wildlife, soil, and it has been directly tied to harmful effects on both humans and animals. So the regulatory agencies are coming up with establishing these maximum contaminant levels to better understand and regulate the amount of PFAS being treated and controlled within the both within the treatment facility, but then also the amount of PFAS that we're able to consume in drinking water. So that being said, and I probably didn't give a very good explanation there, but I did my best. Long story short here is that this is a moving target. So as the state and the feds trying to figure out, what are the impacts of PFAS, there's the flip side of that is how do we treat it in our water system? And ultimately that's the moving target, because if there's enhanced requirements, then ultimately that results in enhanced treatment requirements, which then drives up the cost of a treatment facility.
This is information that the state regulators really want. Should we go forward with it, they're going to start demanding that we provide that to them. And as Amanda's saying, okay, now start treating. Well, the treatment plant just came out in time. Kennedy did this at the David C. McCollum treatment plant with an LT2 upgraded, full overhaul. State regulations, you have this much time to do it, or you're going to turn that plant off. So it's something that they want. But that we would potentially be required to
To
do.
do, yeah.
And Mary, when did you say this started with the state?
PFAS?
PFAS,
Like
they've been
5
poking
years?
around it
Been-
for a number of years, but it's
Mm.
starting to get to a regulatory
Sure, yeah.
level.
Okay.
They propose 4 trillion.
Per trillion now.
Okay.
There is treatment technology.
They're not
Very
cheap.
expensive.
Yeah, it's super easy, super
Yeah.
cheap.
Yeah,
Oh,
Pendleton just shut down some of their wells in the north end because of
of it?
PFAS, yeah.
Oh, gotta turn on the mic, Jake.
Oh, sorry. You saw that movie Dark Waters, it's the same chemical from that movie.
wow.
Microplastics, PFAS, coming from all directions. I think the one thing you can be assured of is there will be a regulatory change sometime in the next 30-year horizon that will have significant capital impacts. Yeah.
Yes. So for the next project, our next set of project considerations is site suitability. And that's something that our consultants did a fantastic job at exploring. So they looked at various considerations and developed an interactive GIS tool to help better understand siting criteria for placement of the pump wells and the treatment facility. So you'll see the list of key considerations on the left are just some of the factors that were considered when developing the GIS tool. Key takeaway, there's a screenshot or a snippet of the GIS output. Key takeaway here is that the green colors, so the green squares, are areas that have the highest suitability. Those are things like there's low contamination, low environmental risk. Maybe we own areas of the land. So those are all factors that were considered. Areas that are deemed red have the lowest suitability. And that's partly because they're either within the actual San Luis Rey River, there's a lot of environmental constraints, there's point and non-point contamination. Maybe they're not in close proximity to existing infrastructure, which ultimately drives up the cost. So all of these considerations were put into analyzing that groundwater study model area. And then from there, 3 different sites were then determined to have the highest suitability.
Looking for reasons to keep this property, right?
I was gonna say,
Mm.
one looked very familiar.
We'll see about
It may change the outcome of the property, though. So that being said, the 3 sites, Upper Basin Scenario 1 site is at district headquarters. The second Mid Basin Scenario 2 site is at 76 and Gerd Road. So those green dots that you see there, the consultant accounted for 5 pump wells and that operate at 400 gallons per minute, and then a treatment facility in close proximity to those pump well sites.
Mm.
And then the last scenario, Scenario 3, Lower Basin, that's right near the old Bonsall Bridge along 76 Holly Lane area. And so those were the 3 sites that had the highest suitability. And from there, the project pumping criteria or the safe yield was then applied to those sites to see how suitable they would be.
Amanda, why would you drill 5 wells in a local area to pull water versus 2 or 3?
It had to do on the amount of yield that
Okay.
the project would
That
expect. So that
well-
desired amount
And
that
they're very shallow aquifers here,
Uh-huh.
and so you can
Yeah.
only suck so much.
So
in
much
one
at a
spot.
time.
And I
Okay.
think 5 is probably high
High.
for these things. I think the yield on these things is probably gonna be, 200 gallon a minute wells in a very shallow aquifer before the cone of depression goes down too
Right.
far and you start sucking air almost.
Gee, 200 gallons a minute. I'd love that.
Well, I'll just as an example, I used to run
22.
I used to run the groundwater system in the city of Vernon, and we had wells that would pump out 1,500 gallons a minute,
Minute.
6-8 months a year in Rancho. What are your wells putting out?
Yeah, 1,000.
1,000. Yeah.
Wow.
So utility scale wells are quite different than residential wells.
It also depends on what the
And you-
the
you're
hole
not-
produces too.
Yeah, that's right. So if you put another well right next to yours, your yield goes down by 50%
Mhm.
Yeah.
right away. So you
Okay,
gotta spread them out,
thank you.
make them small.
So as I alluded in one of the previous slides, project pumping and potable water delivery produce a little bit of different numbers. So with a 32 acre feet per year, 3,200 acre feet per year project pumping would result in about 2.5 million gallons per day potable water delivery. So this results in you're getting about 81% of the project pumping amount as potable water delivery. So something to keep in mind as we look at and explore meat and other factors that you're not going to get the amount that you originally pumped. Project considerations, we have environmental and permitting. This is where things both get fun and complicated. So to date, we know that we have to deal with anywhere from 3 to 5 different local agencies for implementing a project as proposed in the various 3 scenarios. But then also at a state level, we'd be dealing with anywhere from 3 to 5 different state agencies. And then at a federal level, we'd be looking at a minimum of 3 federal agencies that we would need to coordinate with to get permits from or some sort of approval. And so why I mention this is because ultimately, once we engage with the different agencies, we're essentially handing over our project timeline to them. So ideally, we can move as fast as we possibly can, but ultimately, when it comes time for permit issuance, we're at various agencies' mercy to move a project forward. That being said, knowing that there's so many different agencies that will need to coordinate on this project, the intent is to take measures to reduce the amount of agencies that we need to work with. So if we can reduce the amount of river crossings in certain areas or keep out of critical habitat for the least Bell's Vireo or other factors, then by all means, we would take that into consideration when designing the project. So this is a high-level overview of the some of the agencies as well as timeframes of different permit timeframes that we will going to be up against. Overall, the key take here is that bottom timeframe. So we would be looking at anywhere from 5 to about 7.5 years to go through the CEQA environmental process. So that's from CEQA development all the way to obtaining required permits for construction. Julie?
You may,
And that's just to get through the permitting process so that then you can build,
Yes,
which is another 1 to 2 years.
correct.
And this,
Right.
go ahead.
you may be talking about this in later, but with our neighboring water districts, such as City of Oceanside,
Mhm.
is there any way to collaborate as water districts to address some of these significant issues?
There are partnering opportunities to share infrastructure. As far as the environmental CEQA documentation, the project would move forward under a standalone CEQA document. If we receive federal funding, then we would obviously move forward with the enhanced NEPA environmental documentation as well. I don't see necessarily the environmental permitting phases changing too much. However, there may be some cost savings when you're looking at shared infrastructure and maybe reduce impacts to certain areas.
Okay, thank you.
I will add that as the board, when they approved our MOU with Eastern back in the 2019, I believe, it includes a provision to where if we choose to, and they're developing local supply projects up there, we could buy into them if they have capacity, or if we wanted to get access to local supply there as well. I think that you'll also see in the wastewater front, the direct potable reuse regulations are currently out for comment, and they should be wrapped up here in the next, I don't know, what do you think, Jake, 6 months, I imagine? Or who-
By the end of the year.
Supposed to be, but they still haven't closed the comment period. So it's the state of California and all that implies. But that would provide opportunity to develop 1.5 million gallons a day in a conjunction with the project with the City of Oceanside at the San Luis Rey plant. As far as the groundwater exercising our rights, it really comes down to demonstrating you have the rights and then finding a place you can pull them out and then getting it treated, and all that takes cash. And it's bigger. bigger is better on treatment plants as far as
Yeah.
spreading costs, but there's only so much blood you can get out of the stone here in this valley.
Mick, did you?
So this timeline included consideration that we completed a programmatic.
It does.
Okay,
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's actually a great point. The programmatic EIR that we just executed did not include this project. So this will
Okay.
be a
Right.
separate programmatic or a separate PEIR
okay.
that has to be routed
Well, it
for.
might, couldn't it be done as an addendum to our
An amendment.
PEIR, an addendum to our PEIR?
Could possibly.
It depends on the nature of the impacts that are proposed.
Yeah, our PEIR is mainly on pipeline work and things like that. This is a major type of
Right.
facility that has a whole lot of impacts that we were really studying because,
Correct.
I mean, we
Right.
don't even know if we're doing this yet. But yeah.
Yeah, but I thought the programmatic we were doing was infrastructure, not specifically to just pipelines.
It's primarily our linear assets and our
Okay,
Yes.
pipelines.
Yeah,
and-
okay.
Because, and we don't know we don't even know where to study it, right? We don't know where it's gonna go. And so we looked at where our facilities were and are. And we studied the environmental impacts of working in those areas. We can't study any impacts if we don't know where something's gonna be yet. And so
Yeah.
it's hard to do. But it,
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident this project could be wrapped up as an addendum to that, where we can draw on some of the work, some of the mitigation measures and some of the fact, it's not gonna save this pain.
yeah,
But it'll shorten our development of our secret document quite a bit.
Yeah.
But the rest of the pain the state and feds are gonna extract
Yeah,
is darn near unavoidable.
okay.
plus they move at such high velocity.
They're just on top of it. Snap, snap, snap.
Just like that little bridge.
Oh, ask Kurt. Kurt knows about getting CEQA done and your permits and your permits.
I'm fighting.
Maybe
Please
5 to
don't leave
7
any
years?
blood
Is
on the
that-
floor.
is this too optimistic? 5 to 7 years?
Well. You're asking money.
This-
It's gonna depend on where you site it.
Right.
I mean,
Correct.
don't get me going on birds.
Yes.
Oh.
Oh,
Yes.
For deer water sources.
Yes.
Native water.
Yeah.
Restrictions on that. I was 5 to 7.5. I feel like. Very good. Working on Horse Creek Bridge, not working. on-
Yeah.
5 to 7.5 years.
That's an optimistic.
that's being
Best
optimistic.
case.
And it just so happens, we live in a very resource rich area, so water resources, biological resources are just a few of the challenges that we'll be up
Yeah.
against, unfortunately. This timeframe, again, as more information comes up, the conceptual design then segues into 30%, 6%, 90% design. We'll have additional information. But for now, give or take 5 to 7.5 years is where we're at right now. That could change based off of whatever design elements or whatever design changes we account for.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I didn't see cultural resources.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's a biggie.
Big. Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
But in terms of the site, if you identify, really, you have, you know, already. Made vegetation. and things like that.
Goes up to the top pretty fast.
Yeah. So mitigation, you can get the permitting, the mitigation costs on wetlands. I want to say it's, really, yeah, $5,000 to $16,000.
Yeah.
So now it's not just a big area, that's like linear.
Yep.
So,
Not to mention 5 years of mitigation work that has to take place
Right.
too.
It's not.
Multipliers. All right, I don't
Yep.
ask him. He's
How
done.
about anything else?
Oh, I thought he was gonna hit him.
So that 10 to 12 years is the overall anticipated project schedule. Again, things could change based off of the resources that we encounter or the resources that we attempt to avoid.
Okay,
Here's a table of just
Our lifetime.
some of the agencies, permit process, timing. Again, just a different way to visualize some of the challenges that we'll be up against.
I want to make clear that the staff didn't put all these things together to make it be gloom and doom, but we also want to make sure the board's
Yeah.
fully
Yeah.
aware.
Yeah.
And it just so happened, now we didn't, I'm Kurt, he's just happened here and I've been working with Kurt here for the last 9 years and he's seen how this goes. And
Yeah.
it's-
Yeah.
We just want, as you make a decision on, press go, keep moving, or let's take the pause with the off ramp and make other options. Just want to make sure you're aware of some of the things we're ahead of.
Was, I don't know whether you're going to talk about it, but the question of partnering came up. What if you went upstream and partner with Indian tribes?
So we actually reached out to them to request some data sets for them for our groundwater model. And we encountered some challenges.
Let me just
So-
say that the litigation that's ongoing with the Sigma thing, remember we used to
Right.
have that and then the San Luis.
Upper
Rey,
Valley.
the
Upper
upper
Valley.
folks are in litigation. They're essentially on lockdown mode on these
Yes.
discussions. They're very complimentary to us and
Mhm.
we're friends and all, but they don't want to get in. They've got this thing going on. That could last another 50 years in federal court. Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
exactly what's going on. It's a state matter right now, but if it doesn't go their way, it might end up the federal side of it. But right now, and I talked to Ed Roybal, who's the senior attorney for Pollitt. He's like, listen, right now it's, we got no problem with what you guys are doing, but they've got this whole other thing going on that they need to,
iron.
don't want to,
But-
iron out.
But if Paula wanted to build their own facility,
I think
would
that
they
there would
do
be-
that independent of
I
the?
think that if, let's say Paula was to build a new facility for extractions in that area while they're in litigation with other people at GSA, somebody would probably try to block that
Okay.
in court. It just gets, when you get into
Yeah, yeah.
litigation, everything gets screwball and
Contentious.
that's why I worked for 4 years to try to have that not happen. And then we almost got
Yeah.
there and it did happen. It's a bummer because it
San Luis,
throws a ton of.
Santa Margarita watershed,
There you go.
So the
Well,
right,
conjunctive
yeah.
use project,
How long did? it
almost
take
100
for-
years.
Yeah.
That was, that was a
Frank
50
Capra made a
50-year
movie.
process.
50 years.
Frank Capra made a movie about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even the
Little more
one with, some experience with the Chonga,
Yeah.
Chonga
the
and
deal that.
Kauai.
Wolf Valley
Bonanza.
Yeah.
That took about 10 years, but they had significant,
Yeah.
they had a need.
Yeah.
Up there too. It took about 10 years.
I think for right now, Amanda and Malik, our other project manager, have excellent working relationships with all of our neighboring tribes. Tom has worked extensively in his tenure here to do the same. And when we reached out to just get some data,
Mhm.
there was no, and everyone exhausted.
Well, I said, that's why I talked to Ed about that. And he, he understands what we're doing and he'd be happy, if it wasn't the circumstance they're in, they'd be happy to share with us a certain amount of information, but they're in the middle of it over there and
Yeah.
that's what happens sometimes.
Yeah.
But with that being said, we have made it a point to continue to share our work with
Keep the
them and
door
just
open.
Oh,
keep
yeah,
them
yeah.
in the loop on our progress.
Well, we made that, I mean, you and I did it
Yeah.
in Water Authority. We're gonna do this thing, we're gonna make sure you're in the loop and they're in the loop. It's just, they can't, they're kind of stuck in
Mhm.
another
Right,
process.
Right.
It's just,
Okay.
So now for
Just getting
project.
to the really fun stuff.
Oh, boy.
Yes.
uh-huh.
Can't wait.
Oh, no, you're selling Doug's part short.
Just laying the foundation.
Yes,
That's all. So for the two project options that were conceptually identified from the feasibility study, one of those option A, which was using the mid-basin scenario 2 location, constructing a treatment facility in close proximity to Gird Road in the 76, and then running a pipeline up to the FPUD Fallbrook treatment facility. So altogether, for this particular alignment, we would be constructing or responsible for constructing about 9 miles of new pipe. There would be 2 river crossings that would be needed, and then ultimately a long-term kind of ongoing negotiations with FPUD to see if it's even a viable option. So that being said, this is a very preliminary kind of premature conceptual level alignment that still needs to be vetted out and presented to Fallbrook, but it is an option that may be viable if, when the time comes.
And the 9 miles, that is to discharge the brine. This is when that TDS we are talking about, you have to get rid, that's why you're not pumping and treating 100% of the water. So that is one concept would be to send that brine up to FPUD.
Yeah, the brine disposal is always the problem here. I know at Rancho, they're wrestling with how to get rid of brine and could develop more, but the brine is the
Mhm.
problem.
It's dealing with the waste, not the water.
The other option is option B, which is the scenario 3 lower basin option, where we have our 5 pump wells. Our treatment facility is going to be closer to the old Bonsall Bridge. And then we would run our brine line over to the Oceanside brine line. So this particular scenario, we would be constructing about 10 miles of new pipe. Again, similar situation to the FPUD option, where most of it would be tied to the brine line. And then there would be new pipe connections for running from the the test pump wells to the treatment facility, and then also new pipe connections to tie into our existing potable distribution system.
You can't pump the brine down the wastewater line?
No, it
It has to
go-
be a separate line?
It has to go on the brine, the discharge from the treatment plant that goes to the ocean outfall. If we sent brine down to the treatment plant, what would they do to us? Robert and Carrie, you both worked at Oceanside. We would shut down a hot second because all that salt going
Yeah.
into their treatment process just would destroy their treatment plant. So
Okay.
Right.
we've got to run down and go around the San Luis Rey plant and be on the outfall, which we own capacity in. So, but it's we have capacity rights to. That's, I don't know. That's a semantic.
But-
So this is this particular concept is in a similar situation as the FPUD concept, where we haven't presented this option to the Oceanside
Both go
folks yet.
the same pipe to the ocean.
Mhm.
Just takes a different path to get there. Because the FPUD
Mhm.
plant comes down and
Right.
goes, everybody uses the same pipe.
Can we run a pipe inside a pipe?
Yeah, we have to make the Northwood Road
It's
pipe
like a lot bigger.
in order to get it there. So it's just kind of stuck.
All right, so when doing a side-by-side project option comparison, total capital cost for the FPUD option, we're looking at about 81 million. This does take into account a 50% construction contingency and 25% soft cost contingency. For option B, we're looking at 89 million. And then as we make our way down, there's some grayed out boxes that Doug Gillingham will dive into the details a little bit more and figure out how we got to the bottom line of figuring out dollars per acre feet. Another key element is the annual O&M cost. So originally, for folks that attended the E&O committee when this presentation was presented, the O&M costs were higher. There's been some back and forth and ongoing investigative work, as well as cost comparisons to lower that number and back into something that is a little bit more realistic in terms of having those numbers be consistent with other treatment facilities. So we came up with the cost range being anywhere from like high 3.9 million to 4.1 million.
Is there somewhere in Southern California a water district that is able to do this project with livable expenses? I'm just curious.
No.
Is there
No.
anywhere?
I was doing my Trump impression from right there.
Or
So where-
Northern California? It's
livable
just,
expenses.
We're getting a head nod, yes.
Livable,
I mean-
livable is a matter of
or
you know,
cost
perspective.
effective?
I mean,
Yeah.
would you consider FPUD's plant?
But if you're trying to,
Target with
they're
penalty?
they're making recycled water. Yeah, it all depends on, there's so many different variables and where you
Yeah.
are. And so there are projects that pencil, depends on what the sort of salinity you have,
Mhm.
what your options are for disposal, what your location is regard to those things, how much infrastructure you
Right.
got to build to do it. Here, where we are, it's so far from anywhere to get our brine somewhere. Those pipelines at a ton of
Right.
cost. But And it's also the scale of the project. You know, this is a very small plant.
Plant,
So you
yeah.
you have a lot of capital costs. Let's say the plant was double the size, the pipeline to the brine doesn't have to increase much to handle that brine. So the cost of that doesn't double, but you doubled your output, so your cost per acre goes way down. So there's a lot of different factors, but super small brine lines and challenging, you know, demineralization plants in rural areas are gonna be tough.
Okay, thank you.
And Julie, there's a funding opportunity slide that I'll
Okay,
cover towards the end of this
But
presentation.
when you look here, you're just looking at $3,500 an
An
acre
acre
foot.
foot.
and
Right.
That's
These
today,
stuff,
we're
yeah.
buying it for, well, from Eastern, it's gonna be 1,300. So you're well over double the cost of imported water options.
Okay, so before we move forward, why were you shaking your head? Yes.
Doug is,
Okay,
yeah,
hold that
Well,
thought. Okay.
And
it's a
He's gonna do
lecture.
the funding consideration.
Yeah.
the reason I ask is it may be just looking for their solution of being creative to look at others possibilities that we may not even have considered after having discussions with that.
Well, and
Because we're not going to be apples to apples, but it could be part of our ability to think outside the box.
but okay, what? But this is just looking at our acre
Right.
feet.
Yeah.
I mean, this doesn't take into consideration, could we team with Valley Center, take their acre feet?
Oh, no, this
and
includes
scale up?
Alexander.
Or it does
It's
include? Okay.
Yeah, and we'd have to have an agreement with them. to
Well,
use
sure,
it,
we'd have.
Which
to
they've
have
said they
agreement.
have a
Yeah,
problem with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
They're not gonna buy it for $3,500 an acre foot.
Right.
no,
They'll say, go ahead, use it, but we're not gonna pay you for it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Because those acre foot values take care of the whole watershed.
okay.
Project timeline. And we briefly touched on this, don't want to spend too much time on it, but just
Don't
from
choke
the
Don't show.
the pump testing. The long range pump testing is going to take about a year and then down to construction. It's proposed at about 2.5 years. So this doesn't take into account, shows year 1 to year 6. This does not take into account the environmental permitting and the
Big
environmental
black hole of time. environmental
requirements.
Permitting in the middle there. All right.
So just something to keep in mind.
Right.
Julie, the questions that you had with funding opportunities and whether or not there are
Mhm.
projects out there that are worthwhile, or I guess what was the terminology that you used, livable options? I think it was.
Realistic.
Realistic, yes. That being said, there are other water agencies that are constructing treatment facilities and they're receiving grant funding opportunities to fund various aspects of the project. However, where we're at now for our feasibility study, we have $0 in grant funding. That doesn't necessarily mean that we will not be eligible. There's a process to become eligible to receive grant funding. And then at that point, then we would take on a more active role for securing grant funding opportunities.
And I'm assuming that the grant funding reduces your cost per acre foot.
Mhm.
Correct.
So-
These projects primarily, look at the list, are primarily reclamation, water recycling projects.
Right.
Not demineralization.
So looking at this, what I can see, and it's tiny print, but within San Diego County, there's City of Oceanside, Padre Dam is Santee, and Olivahan. Okay, so we do have some in San Diego County.
And why I provided this table too is because one, there's local agencies in San Diego County that are performing similar type projects. And also the funding amounts range from 10 million all the way to 28 million. So the opportunities are out there. It's just how do we get there? How do we position ourselves to be eligible for this funding
Yeah, I think
opportunity?
there's 2 other desalters in San Diego County, the Mission Desalter in Oceanside and the one down at Sweetwater. Those are the only ones I'm aware of as desalters. There's a lot of recycling projects.
Mhm.
But per groundwater desalters, they're a tougher road to hoe.
So in addition to the grant opportunities, there's also low interest loans available. And there's also buyback opportunities. And I believe there was one other option. Carrie, if you could, do you mind elaborating a little bit more on some of the funding opportunities?
Good afternoon, members of the board. Carrie Dale with Hope Consulting, and I was previously the Water Utilities Director at the City of Oceansides. So,
Operations-
so yeah, if you have questions on this particular project, I'm happy to answer them. You're on the right path in terms of positioning yourself to get the funding from the Bureau of Reclamation. This feasibility study is the first step in doing that. And just to elaborate on what that can bring to the table, it can pay up to 25% of your project costs or $30 million, whichever is less. And for the Oceanside project, for example, we did receive the full 25% cost
Right, yeah.
share from the federal government. But there's also a lot of state funding that's available that comes through the water bond. There are some loan programs that come through the state and federal government. WIFIA is one of them that is through EPA that has a rather low interest rate right now. It's 4.24% currently and can pay 50% of your project costs. And that's a reimbursement loan. So you're fronting that money first and then you're getting repaid for the expenses. The state revolving fund is also a good loan program that can fund 100% of your program. And that's at 2.1% currently. And those are moving targets. So it's depending on where the market is. The Metropolitan Water District also offers the Local Resources Program, which Amanda alluded to. That's a very good program that is a rebate program. So after you start producing water, it will pay you back on a per acre foot basis. Depending on the program you choose, it could be between $305 an acre foot to $475 per acre foot rebated back over a period of time, which could range from 15 to 25 years, depending on the program. So there are quite a few programs available. Those are just the big ones, but for grants right now, it's a very opportune time, especially with the federal government, to take advantage of those opportunities. So I'm here to say you can do it. If I just want to put my 2 cents in on this, you can do it. We did it in 7 years, but it was fast tracked. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for you. So I'll turn the microphone back over.
Thank you. So the last slide is the question slide. Once we're finished up with the presentation, we'll transition into Doug Gillingham's information on the economic feasibility aspect of the project. And then from there, I imagine it will result in additional conversation. So I don't want to spend too much time on the question slide, but if there's anything pressing that anybody has, feel free to ask now before I hand it over to Doug. You guys kind of did.
I had mine asked.
Oh, yeah, we had.
Okay.
All right, well.
Thank you.
Gillingham,
We're
you
known
may
for that.
recall, a few years ago when the Water Authority was planning their regional conveyance system. And just full disclosure, I've known Doug for almost 25 years, worked with him in the design of the Liebenheim plant and his famous air circulation, non-air removal system that he reminded me of last week. But his one mistake ever in his career. But
Well, there's an intro.
yeah. He's made one. He's only made one. He's only made one. It was a big one, but he only made one. No, so, but what Doug does is he does engineering economics. So looking at engineering and forecasting costs. Hoke put together some cost numbers in there, but what we want to do for you as the board and for us as a staff is have somebody who's not with Hoke look at the numbers, because not to say they would, but they have a financial interest in this project not getting off ramped, right? So we want to get an impartial analysis, and they did find some discrepancies. I don't want to say discrepancies, but difference of opinion that over the last week or so they've sorted out to narrow in on what both parties feel is a reasonable approximation what we go on. But also what Doug does really well, and I showed you a spreadsheet that he and Don together for the RCS project, that there's different sliders that we can adjust. Because any forecast is always wrong because you're guessing on a certain number of variables remaining the constant over there. So what he'll be able to show you today is that if we look at this variable or this value or that value and we change it, here's what happens to your rate of return and the viability or non-viability of the project. And there's one real important one related to detachment that has a pretty significant impact on this project. So Doug, take it away.
Well, thank you. With that introduction on my.
It's my last board meeting. Doug. Come on. I already got the flag. So what the hell?
It's apt though, because like Tom says, the opportunity to make the number of opportunities you have to make mistakes and to misrepresent an economic feasibility assessment is almost infinite. And so that's it. That's my first caveat. I'm starting off with caveats tonight. By the way, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. I love talking with boards about economic feasibility, capital investments. You saw the capital cost of $85 million or more up there. The nature of a capital investment is that you're spending money up front on the expectation of benefits down the road. And in this case, you're also hoping for supply reliability and local control and non-reliance on the Colorado River and the State Water Project. And those are all interesting aspects. But whenever anybody comes to your board meeting and simply says, yeah, we've looked at the economics of this project and it's a good deal, then you should really be skeptical of that, because there are just so many inputs to this. And I can turn the dials on the economic model and show you that this project is enormously cost effective or it's the worst investment ever. And so really it's a combination of science and art and magic 8-ball work. And we try to have really professional and foreign magic 8-balls, because we're looking far into the future and saying, how are these things going to play out? And we're talking about dollars in the future, and dollars in the future are always mysterious to us, because do you want $1 million now, or do you want $1 million in 20 years? Well, that's easy. I want $1 million now. Okay. Do you want $1 million now, or do you want $2.5 million in 20 years? And then that gets quite a bit more complicated, right? Because we know that those future dollars are suffering from inflation. The buying power of those dollars declines over time. But there's also other interesting aspects of how we value money in time. And we'll talk about that a bit more. My second caveat, and you're witnessing this in action already, is that I'm an engineer. And you know the old story about engineers. You ask an engineer what time it is, and they won't tell you the answer until they first spend 20 minutes explaining to you how the watch works. And then maybe if they're a philosopher, also getting into, well, what does time actually mean? And so I'm going to make a compromise with you. I'm going to jump to the conclusions, but then I'm going to back up and insist that you walk through with me with all the different ways that you can manipulate these numbers, because it's important that at the end of the day, you have confidence that we've built in reasonable assumptions so that you can make an informed decision and exercise your fiduciary member as board members to decide whether or not to invest $85 million of ratepayer money in this project. Okay.
80.
Turn my hearing aids up.
I think we might need a break.
Okay. That was my first slide. The rest of my slides won't take as long as the first slide, I promise. Okay, we're losing the very top, but that's okay. The economic comparison that we're making is between the project and its no project alternative. And the no project alternative is the status quo. It's that you continue to purchase that same increment of supply from your imported supplier, whether that's the water authority or, can I advance the slide? Oh, you're adjusting that. Okay, thank you. Now it works. Thank you. So whether it's the water authority or whether it's Eastern, and Tom already alluded to this, that has a significant effect on the project. And it's a bit of a perverse effect, really, because transitioning to Eastern economically is a very good deal for the district. But in terms of the project, it reduces the avoided cost of not having to buy that much imported water. And so the project fares much better economically with the water authority as a supply than it does as Eastern. And sorry about that. That's the unfortunate consequence here. Oh, I promise you I was going to give you the results up front. So the results up front are that if the water authority were to remain your imported water supplier, this project maybe comes close to break even. And if you can make some more optimistic assumptions or maybe reconfigure the project in different ways, it might be a good project and it might be worth further investing. But if Eastern is your supplier, not so much. I'll show you some of the numbers on that. The evaluation criteria we're looking at are cost factors and non-cost factors, the benefits of reliability and local control and sustainability and those things. And here's our agenda. I'm going to cover the non-cost factors, tell you about the cost factors. There's the upfront conclusion with Water Authority as the supplier. The project falls just short of break even over a 30-year period of project operations. And with Eastern as a supplier, the project falls short of economic break even. And the next steps would be that if the Water Authority is the district's wholesale supplier, it appears to me, I don't get to make the decision, but it appears to me that it's worth at least some further investment to see what opportunities are there. But if Eastern is the supplier, not so much. Okay, here are the non-cost factors, just a simple rating table. The project scores well for supply reliability. Water quality is neutral. We're meeting the existing drinking water quality standards. Local control is a big thing. Give that two green up thumbs. And then on the topic of environmental sustainability, the project scores well on salt management. You're removing salt from an impacted groundwater basin. That's an environmental positive. You're reducing reliance on the Bay Delta system. You're reducing Colorado River reliance. Those are both enormous positives for state water policy. And this project has a lower energy footprint than any imported water supplies. Even though you're pumping water through reverse osmosis membranes, it's a lot less pumping than what it takes to get imported water here. And so it's because of those environmental benefits that, in part because of those benefits, that grant programs exist to fund exactly this type of project. And as Carrie Dale was explaining to you, it's entirely reasonable that this project would receive at least 25% grant funding of its capital cost. And here are those cost numbers again. 80-some million dollars of capital costs and about $4 million of additional operating costs on top of that. The two projects are very similar in cost. And so the remainder of my presentation here is going to look only at alternative A. But if we need to, we can open up the economic model and I can show you the differences, but they're pretty small between A and B. What we do with the economic model is we're looking at a period of net present value. In this case, we're starting off with the assumption that we're looking at 30 years of project operations. And as you've heard discussion, that 30-year period doesn't start for several years. It takes us a while to get there. And during that time, imported water rates keep going up. Water authority rates are going up faster than inflation and have for a long time. And so when you inflate those costs out over 30 years and then discount them back to present worth, that has a present worth value of about $187 million with the Water Authority as your wholesale supplier. So that's the benefit of the project, is that you avoid the costs of the no project alternative. On the other side of the balance scale, you have the project. You have, in present worth terms, after adjustments for financing and whatnot, about $90 million of capital costs. You get about a quarter of that back in grant funding. You have long-term O&M costs, 30 years of O&M costs, present worth value, $129 million. You get a little bit of that back from Metropolitan Local Resources Program, and your total is about $191 million. And so there's the comparison. The project cost advantage is negative. It's slightly negative, close to break even, but it's not quite there. And so if we look at the same analysis with Eastern as a supply, the left side of the table is going to stay the same. There's no change to the project. But what changes is the avoided cost for the no project alternative goes way down. And so now we've gone from close to break even to we're $70 million in the hole. And
There you
you
go.
would have to be,
This is just the cost for that 2,500 acre feet, 2,600 acre feet a year. So our actual, when we go to Eastern over that period of time, the savings will be triple or quadruple that.
thank you. I didn't mean to tank your detachment issues. Yeah, this is a small portion of the supply. Okay, so any intermediate questions on that basic topic? I'm going to quickly go through some of the key inputs that go into the analysis, and then we'll come back to a different set of graphs. So quickly, the key inputs, we can change the alternative. Right now, we're selected alternative A. We can adjust the production capacity, and that's on the expectation that projects of this type in this size range have rather enormous economies of scale. That if it were possible to make it larger, the economics get a lot better, and we can play with that. We have something called a plant capacity factor, which is percentage of time that the plant is up and operating during the year. Some people think that that's optimistic, but we can adjust that and test it. Yeah, what do they know? What do the operators know? And the production volume, about 2,600 acre feet per year, from groundwater pumping of about 3,300 acre feet per year. We can adjust the wholesale supplier, toggle between the Water Authority and Eastern. And we can adjust our assumptions about future escalation of those imported water rates. And that's an enormous factor in this. We'll get to that. We can adjust the grant funding. We can toggle the local resource program, whether it's going to exist in the future or not. We can adjust capital and operating costs. And a rather geeky detail, we can decide whether the engineering, the final design portion of costs is financed or whether it's pay-go funds upfront. And lastly, the finance and net present value terms, we're looking to start with at 30 years of project operations. We're assuming a 30-year term on a loan or bonds. And we have discount rates and interest rates, cost of funds, and assumed water system-based inflation, which historically runs quite a bit higher than consumer price index inflation. So those are key inputs to the model. And that leads us to this graph here, and let me orient you to what you're looking at. This is a comparison on a year-by-year basis of how much money, of what the cost difference is between the project and the no project alternative. And what you're seeing there is on the left, you have these upfront years where you're spending money developing the project. Those are red bars. Those are, you're spending more than you would for the status quo. And then the project goes into operation, and in time, it starts to pay for itself because your payment on the loan for the capital is fixed. And because everything else is inflating, in particular imported water rates, which presumably are inflating even faster than inflation. At the bottom, we've got the total of the red. That's a $21 million additional that you're spending in those years before you get to the benefits. And the advantage is the same $4 million negative number that you saw in the previous table. And then here are some of, this is a screenshot from the economic model. This is an abbreviated version of the dashboard that shows just a few of the key adjustments that we can make there. And so let's toggle the first one. So that's the analysis you saw for the Water Authority. It's close to break even, but with this rather difficult political problem of how do you rationalize all of those red bars in the hope of getting to the black bars in the future. So there's -4. And if we switch to Eastern, then we're back to this -72.
Our CS payback.
And the red bars go on for a long time.
If we go at 92 years. then
Yeah.
we get-
No, because we'll be using less water, so we'll have less
Yeah.
to get.
Right. We're gonna be at it.
Okay, let's look at a couple other sensitivities. Usually when I do this type of presentation, we start off with a project that I'm telling you is cost effective. So a lot bigger black bars, a lot smaller red bars. And the focus of my presentation is then let's test the ways that we can look at even more conservative assumptions and see if the project still looks good after we adjust these. I'm going to go in the opposite direction today. This project right now is sort of a meh kind of project, as the younger people would say. So I'm going to show you what it might look like if we make more optimistic assumptions. And the first one's easy. I'm going to change the rate escalation from what we've tagged as mid-range to high, because the mid-range is based on the Water Authority's current 10-year rate forecast. And I don't think there's anybody that thinks that that's accurate anymore. It's already going up
Already done.
higher than.
Nobody-
And so simply switching that forecast to high, we now have a much more attractive looking project. It still has this problem of how do you justify the red bars up front? But this is saying that over a 30-year period, if these are all the right assumptions for interest rates and discount rates and whatnot, that in the long term, this is a good deal for your ratepayers. What else do we do? Oh, okay. Oh, they're there. Okay. I'm compounding now. I've switched the rate escalation to high, and I've dialed up the capacity of the project from 2.5 to 4 MGD. And I'm picking up those economies of scale at this size project. And now we have a really good project, I think. And so what this tells me about the project is that you're at a very preliminary stage of all this right now, and the costs are all very preliminary. It seems to me that there is at least potential, if the Water Authority remains your supplier, that this could be a good project. And I think it would be worth investing a little bit further to fine tune some of these uncertainties and see if there's something there. If, on the other hand, you go to Eastern, then here are some of the things we might do to try to make this look better. Okay, they're there.
Well, hang on a second. It's like a couple of questions. So we started out with Amanda's presentation, which basically said all we can get to is 2,700 acre feet. And that's not 4 million gallons a day.
Yeah,
So crank that down to what we
Yeah.
can actually get.
well, I think
And-
that's one of the
Yeah.
things that when he
You
when he
know.
concludes, if he does,
Yeah.
I was down there, it doesn't pencil
Yeah.
at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So especially if, even with the higher rate
Yeah.
escalation, it's still a problem.
And then I think
Eastern.
the other thing that I'm seeing is that it doesn't look good from an eastern side of things because we're paying less for that water.
Right.
Okay, so this model doesn't really take into account that aspect, well, I think, nor does it really paint us the picture of from the
That's
minute
what he's
we
doing.
leave and that pot of money is growing because we're saving, how does that look compared to how much it costs? And then is it a good deal?
Right. Right.
I think he's trying to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
And
what,
that's
yeah,
where
some
you're
of these things, yeah. It's an
Okay.
avoided cost analysis. The only way this
Yeah.
project makes sense, unless you said, Jake, find us some water. We don't care how much it costs.
Right.
We just want local supply, period.
Yeah.
If you're Padre Dam, MWD, and that's what you like to do. But if you say, hey, find us local supply that is also cost effective, sorry, that was an inside joke. There's find us a water supply that's also cost effective, then we have to look at an avoided cost scenario to do this. And you have to, figure out, there's 15 years of project development, and then we got to do it from there. And that's where Doug comes in. And basically what he's saying is that if you're with Eastern, then even if the high escalation, it gets worse, but if but the water
I
authority.
mean,
it's just-
even,
Yeah.
I mean,
gets better
and
with
that's,
Eastern,
that's the current chart you're on is a very optimistic forecast, shows it doesn't pencil out.
Exactly.
With
So,
Eastern.
so the point is that we've changed to Eastern. We've dialed rate escalation to high. We've dialed capacity up to 4 MGD, which, as Director Gasco notes, may not be real. And we've reduced the capital and operating costs to boot. And we still
Don't quite.
we still don't quite get there. And so this tells me that with Eastern, it's a tough sell.
So the discussion is come back in December after we know the results of the vote,
And
or probably.
Well, there's a couple of recommendations. I'll have that.
Yeah.
We have to
Sure.
include.
December.
I kind of stole your thunder. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, okay.
Well, the votes will have been counted in.
Oh, and by the way, Sweetwater plant, the Sweetwater Reynolds desalter plant operates at 8 MGD capacity. They estimate their operating costs at $400 an acre foot. That plant had the advantage of getting 75% grant funding.
Yeah, that's a plus.
yeah,
That's a
I-
plus.
And they're able to dispose of their brine concentrate almost outside the door from the plant into the tidal zone of the river channel there.
That's
so
how
that's-
projects like that become viable.
Yeah. So there are examples, but yeah, the challenges of brine disposal are difficult for these.
What happens if you can kick the grant funding up to like 50% on Eastern?
That would put it into the positive along with these other things. I have the economic model available. And
Right.
if you want to geek out, we can pull it up and turn knobs, but if we can
It's kind of a
stop
moot
here
question
too.
right now.
Tom's looking
No,
to
we,
watch.
well, I know Kurt wants to do his thing, but we can give you a copy of the spreadsheet and you can toggle all those.
And-
I don't see any reason playing with it until after we know what's going to
Yeah, yeah,
happen
yeah,
in
yeah.
November.
I have to agree with Hayden. I think we need to,
I mean, this is good
Well,
information.
I don't know how
But we're
close you
done.
are to the end, Doug.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
we need it.
So looking at this and as I guess, my final recommendation, I'll be giving this board as a general manager at a board meeting is that I think he's right. If Eastern's our supplier, which is at our operating condition right now, we should table it. However, I do think there's a two-pronged approach to go here that is going to be important and it ties into what you said. Part of this feasibility analysis, we should go talk to the Bureau, like Carrie said, and get Kim on it, Amelia Kim on it to start talking to Jack Symes and Jake knows Jack because his office was up there in Temecula. So sit down with him, see about getting some funding to fund these next steps.
Yes, yeah.
The other part of it is to start looking at expanding the project if possible.
Mhm.
And so I know I've had a conversation with Alfred about trying to convert riparian water rights into water rights that we can use. And while it's not something that's really done, it might be a good argument for the state who wants us off the Delta, who wants us off the Colorado River. There are pre-1914 active riparian rights in here, some just east of us, some in this area. Ocean Breeze has a couple thousand acre feet. We could likely cobble something together if the state could allow a permitting. Also, in what is this a freak chance of timing? Last week when I was clearing out my office, Dawn asked me to go through old legal records that were there before I got here in a cabinet because she's supposed to scan. She said, go through these, figure out what's in there. Because some of them, they're probably already met our time for disposal anyway, so I don't have to scan them. Going through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of documents, I came across one that was from a general manager that was here in 2003, who had inquired about 3,000 acre feet of water rights that Rainbow had at some point had abandoned. And they had responded to him in a very detailed 4-page letter, which doesn't say, yeah, you're good, but it also doesn't say pound sand, you'll never get them. It kind of outlines the steps you'll need to take. But it means that there was a communication. Now, he got fired by the board not too long after that for other things that he was doing. But I had no idea that communication ever happened. It just so happened I was going through last week. So Chad and Jake and Alfred all have a copy of that letter to start taking a look at. So my recommendation would be to pause on the project. This is the off ramp you wanted. these results that Doug has shown shows that, you know, if you can get more grant funding, if you can get more volume into it, volume is a big one on this.
Yeah.
I still don't know. You'd have to go back and look at the hydraulics. You know, it's only 120 feet deep at the deepest, this groundwater basin. Then you start having not 5 wells, but 20 wells. And then they're spread out farther and farther and capital costs start going up. So it goes both ways. But I think that at this point, unless and until you can pin some of that stuff down. And if we're shackled to the water authority forever, then yeah, all right. I was just thinking, we're sitting here, maybe you could see if, you know, you could sell it to some other water authority member agencies. If you could make it pencil and water authority rates, produce the water here, sell it to Valley Center or
Center,
somebody
yeah.
for a surcharge. Just saying. But right now, I think that the right move is to pause the current contract. Well, they're not going to do it
No.
today. They're going to
Yeah.
come back to you like in December, I
Well,
think.
that's my question for the board and for Jake, since this is Tom's last meeting. When would you like staff to come back with a board action item with a staff recommendation? Because we do have earmarked funds in this account that could be moved elsewhere in the budget.
I'd like to see the tool go to the engineering committee and let them look at it. And I'd like to take a look at it and see.
Do you want to see, because we've had workshops with Doug where we ask him, make it do this, and he dials it live. Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah, that would be
Okay.
good.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
We were
I
thinking
think-
December because it'll be after the election and we'll know.
Yeah.
First of the year, either one.
Do you want to do that after the election?
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's
I-
get some from Flint.
I would basically say, let's continue to explore opportunities in terms of partnering or funding or things like
funding.
that. Anything that will drive the cost down. Let's continue to investigate those, but in terms of bringing it back to us for a decision.
No.
Well, I mean, and
Too
we
early.
have the board in our agreements with the board, when we made this decision to move forward with a $1.2 million contract, there were some off ramps and
Mhm.
we just want to get the board to say, now's the time to take that off ramp or not. So otherwise, the board has authorized the expenditure. to go
The remaining
in-
$600,000.
the $600,000 on the table.
Okay.
My recommendation is don't spend that $600,000. Just
Exactly.
because right now it doesn't look too positive if we're with Eastern.
Right.
But that's just a pause, right? But if the election fails and we're stuck with the water authority forever, then it's like, all right, well, I guess we ramp it back up. If the election goes our way and it looks, and the voters confirm our move to Eastern, notwithstanding the water authority's nonsense lawsuit, the operating condition is we're moving to Eastern and this project doesn't pencil.
I agree that at this time, it is best to not continue any funding in this, that we wait to see the outcomes of several things, being the election, the voting of our ratepayers. Also, that I encourage continued search into federal and state and local funding sources. I think we have some really good resources here with the city of Oceanside and others in our county. I think at that time, if there are things that come up significantly that would help us to do the funding with this with lower cost to the ratepayers, we look at it again in detail. But at this time, at least as one member of the board, I think this needs to be on hold and the 600,000 be reverted to go back to the funding.
CIP project.
Yeah, because we have other.
I
we have-
totally agree.
Yeah, we have
Totally.
other issues.
Not-
Well, this is an information item.
I'd
so-
like to hear from Flint, please.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you. This is a little nerdy and I'm probably piling on with the direction that Doug is going. But the other piece of what I was looking for in an economic analysis is what is the opportunity cost associated with the money we have to raise to prosecute this project? Because no matter how much grant funding we get, there is going to be a quote local match. And that money is either going to come from borrowed money, bonds or shorter term loans, or it's going to come from ratepayers in the form of higher rates.
Right.
And it strikes me that a complete economic analysis would say that if we had to come up with 20 million of our own, what is the opportunity cost for that 20 million?
Yeah.
Could we not have invested it in pipeline replacement
Right.
and infrastructure so that we don't spend money on brakes and other things that we have to deal with on an emergency basis? And so my suggestion to the board is that you might want to consider what are the opportunity costs for the non-grant funded aspects of this project.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
That's exactly right.
Staff can prepare, because this is informational, we can prepare an action memo that we could take to possibly the December E and O committee and the December board meeting. If that were.
That would be worthwhile. I mean, to be honest with you, the lady that was
Carrie.
explaining.
Carrie?
Carry all the cost is, that's great. All it does is add to the cost. Every dollar you borrow is just adding to the cost of per acre foot downstream because you got to pay the interest. So, yeah,
Yeah.
what's the
it's-
cost of opportunity?
it's a dicey And I think that if you go to Eastern, I think if it's Eastern, table it. That's and I think that's the right.
Yeah.
one. But it doesn't cost us much to have Amelia keep counting on
Yep.
them and
I
try to
think
see if
grant
we can
funding
change the
might be
scale.
able
And
to
then
be applied to
if you
something
can get
else.
different funding ratios and different economies of scale, then maybe the math changes a little bit. But it's gonna be tough if we
Yeah.
going to Eastern is why that's why we.
Why we're doing it in the first place.
Water is too damn expensive. It's also why the water authorities underestimates the loss of demands because everybody's looking at these sorts of things. And even ours, which is marginal, there are a lot across the county which will be better because they're larger or closer to a discharge point or whatever, that they're gonna go, man, this thing's gonna break even in 5 years. Move on it. Yeah.
It's just like the little chart here, and there was a blip at 2008. Oh, isn't that when the county water authority
Raised rates, but
rates?
did you see
Yep.
that?
And you had a blip in your loss in agriculture.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Strange how that.
Staff will coordinate with Gillingham and Associates to get on the E and O's agenda, and that may push when we come back to the board
Okay,
by a month or so.
but
Yeah, so what I heard was, in addition to that, Amanda to continue working with Amelia
Kim,
and
Amelia,
Kim
Amanda.
to look at funding sources.
You gotta look at Jake going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Don't look at me.
Well, I was gonna say,
Look at
too,
that guy.
you know, it's interesting because Carrie's right. There's a lot of opportunities out there right now, especially for projects like this. Now, you've shown though, it's going to take a lot of money. But there's also,
but
you know,
their infrastructure.
well,
projects
and
too,
they've
right?
started to fund feasibility studies too.
Right,
That's the
what you're
thing.
gonna
Yeah.
fund.
Right.
So the bureaus started to fund desal studies. They put out a funding opportunity, I don't know, 6-7 months ago. So I think there's an opportunity too,
Mhm.
where you
Yeah.
can complete the study, do these other sensitivity analysis, find what your target is, right?
Yeah.
Where you go, hey, if I got X, now the project makes sense. So there's activities we can do that not spending $600,000 on design work.
Or
It seems
spend
like this point,
600,000
we-
in federal
yeah.
money.
yeah, you kind of need a reset here and
Yeah.
figure out,
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
where your targets are. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's, but
And-
that's, I can put that on my list.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think using
Well, they're
the
all
the
on your
current
list, Jake.
money,
I know.
Just to make this clear, all on your list.
but I think keeping a lot of things open, but at this point, we do have other items and we continue to talk about our infrastructure
Yeah.
and 600,000 is significant. And when I'm talking about grants and all that, I'm not asking for matching. I'm asking for those that are not asking for us to do a 50-50 with them.
Yeah.
But
The unicorn grant.
well, there, and that's where we start to research, that, but there are other pressing issues at this time, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it was a good point too. Can you make the project make sense? Is it your best project too?
Yeah.
So there's,
Yeah.
That's a great point. So
Okay. Okay.
appreciate the feedback.
Okay,
Julie, can I ask before we take a break that if we could do number 23 real quick? Because Kurt's been kind enough to sit here for
Oh,
a
you
couple
bet.
hours patiently. And I know he's got other things to do that are more important than this. And so I was hoping we could do that one before we take a break and have more gush stuff on item 22.
so
23, it's an amendment to the standard sewer service agreement between Rainbow and Pappas Investments for the Paula Ranch,
Okay.
formerly known as Campus Park West. Whenever these developments come in and they want to bind up our sewer capacity EDUs, our standard administrative code requires a 50% deposit. This project is the one that's right across the freeway where the model airplane park will be. It'll be 500,000 square feet of commercial. There is some industrial that's delayed, and I can't remember how many units are residential ultimately. A couple hundred.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, we
ahead.
can do it.
Your own.
Okay.
No, you said we wouldn't hear from you anymore.
Yeah, I guess I lied. Yeah, good afternoon, President and directors. In terms of residential, we have a approval in one of the planning areas. The project is primarily a commercial retail. I'm a consultant for Pappas Investments, just to make that clear. And what they do is they have a residential component that they will sell off to a guest builder. It's approved for 248 multifamily units. The ultimate yield on that depends largely on who the buyer is and the type of product that they want to put on it. If they were to do detached condos, which I don't think that my client would probably accept an offer for that because it's not going to provide enough yield. But we're hoping that hopefully it'll be, it's never the amount you're approved for just because of setbacks and roads and radiuses and everything, but hopefully as close to that number as possible. I don't know, did I answer that question,
Yeah.
Tom?
So what they need right now is to get their final permitting done with the county, and part of that is get the sewer services agreement. The large cost of the sewer capacity fees would make it challenging for them to finance that currently. But you say, well, that's not our problem. But there's two aspects of this that make us want to facilitate this project. One is that we hear from people in Patty's neighborhood all the time about, where do I go to a store? I know a lot of people live out there and everywhere else, you know, heck, you guys in Division 1 shop at the El Norte Vons where I shop. I live in Escondido. And so having some commercial and retail here in the district is beneficial for us. But the other more selfish thing, the district itself, is that the development project for this headquarters is going, now that we don't have the joint use project going with the fire and sheriff, because that kind of fell apart. We're going to need to go to the county and get this place entitled for the residential to raise the funds. The big part of that is going to be the VMT calculation. And while that project won't cure the entire problem, it'll go a hell of a long way toward it, because they'll ask, where's the closest grocery store to where these houses are going to be? Well, now we say, oh, it's 10 miles that way or 12 miles that way or 6 or 7 miles that way. That kills your project. If there's one a quarter mile away, or even one that's approved and planned and done, then it's gonna be a lot easier for us to get that entitlement on this property. And so if we want to short track our entitlement of this and get this beautiful headquarters replaced for Jake to set in a grand opening someday, then I think getting this one going faster helps. So what we're doing is they're paying a much smaller than the 50%. They're paying about 3%, but it's non-refundable. So if they bail out, we get it back. But we keep it.
Just to clarify, we're not talking about paying anything reduced on capacity
Right,
fees.
right.
Okay.
We're talking about the
Upfront payments.
the upfront deposit. We've had extremely strong interest from the tenant community on it, basically saying, well, how soon can we get out there and break ground? The client is just trying to make it work
A
financially
little
wise.
bridge problem with the county and Caltrans.
Yeah, the list is long. It's been a long meeting, so I will spare you guys all those details. But as Tom said, we believe that it would benefit Rainbow as well, because one, you've got services nearby. That's going to help your VMT analysis. I think I'm not a traffic expert, but it should also make this property more valuable for if it does become residential. The other thing is we're looking at it, trying to put our Tom and Chad hat on. You know, they kind of beat us up a little bit in the room as they do, but that's their job. And
You're still here.
yeah. The other thing about it is we said we don't see an opportunity cost to the district doing this, because Ocean Breeze Ranch is behind us in terms of processing timeline. There isn't really another big development that you guys would be setting those capacity fees aside for and not able to sell. So we kind of viewed it as basically it's kind of a win-win, because the district isn't really losing out on anything. Thank you.
That's the recommendation is that we approve this slightly altered standard sewer service agreement.
Is there a sunset clause?
30 months.
30 months.
30 months.
30
30
months, they
months.
don't come in and pay the rest of it. We keep the
Keep
rest
the
of the
money
whole
and
thing.
the-
And there must be the full true up of the remaining 47% within the 30 months for the district keeps the
Okay.
165. and change.
Yeah,
And how did you determine 30 months?
they wanted 36, we wanted 24, so we ended up on 30.
Exactly it.
It's that's how.
So how about 28?
No. What do you do?
I'm just joking.
I won't tell you what we really wanted initially.
Yeah, I know. Well, I
Yeah,
know.
no, don't even go
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So is there a motion?
I still move
Second,
That's option one to approve the
correct.
option one.
option one, moved by Director Gasca, seconded by Director Johnson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? You got your wish, more or less.
And now Julie gets her wish
Yeah.
and my wish too.
Yes,
A bio
could
break.
we take just a 5-minute break so I can get more water? And do that, okay? Sounds good? 3:22. Oh, you're welcome. So all we're asking is to make sure you come up with your
Thank you,
comments.
thank you for your feedback on the earlier thing too. That was very insightful. I mean,
You only gave me 5 minutes.
Hey, Hayden, get this show on the road. Hey.
Where's Julie? Is she in the back of the queue? Oh, there she is. Okay.
That cleared the room pretty good.
Well, the next one will obviously clear the room real quick. But
I want to say something. We got a really nice compliment from that gentleman. Because you guys were gone, Doug. He said this board gets along lovely together and he felt very welcome here and very nice and easygoing
Doug's a good
situation.
guy.
He goes to a
Yes.
lot of boards.
He does go to a lot of boards.
Item number 22 in resuming our activities. Discussion and possible action to approve resolution 23-24, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Rainbow Municipal Water District commending Tom Kennedy for his leadership and dedication. And for the record, I'd actually like to read the resolution into the record.
Yeah, Don told me I couldn't read it in advance, so I haven't.
Did
even-
you?
Oh, you haven't seen it?
else is gonna sing this once?
Resolution
I'm a
20.
few bars, I'll take it.
Resolution 23-24, resolution of the Board of Directors of Rainbow Municipal Water District commending Tom Kennedy for his leadership and dedication. Whereas the Board of Directors of the Rainbow Municipal Water District wishes to recognize Tom Kennedy for his outstanding service as general manager, and whereas Tom Kennedy was selected by the board in August 2014 to serve as the Rainbow Municipal Water District General Manager and is the longest serving general manager at RMWD since the 1970s. And whereas Tom Kennedy, upon commencing his tenure as general manager, organized and helped lead the successful effort to keep Rainbow Municipal Water District a separate organization during the attempted hostile takeover through the San Diego County Local Agency Formation Commission, LAFCO, process. And whereas Tom Kennedy became a certified special district manager in February 2017 and again in December 2021. And whereas Tom Kennedy challenged both the board of directors and staff to achieve California Special District Association accreditation in both the District Transparency Certificate of Excellence from 2015 to present, as well as the District of Distinction designation from 2017 to present. And whereas Tom Kennedy's commitment and dedication to the success of the district was demonstrated by the significant number of projects that were successfully undertaken, including numerous software upgrades, capital improvement projects, and the water services upgrade project. And whereas Tom Kennedy partnered with other special districts in our area in the spirit of cooperation to meet current and future challenges in our community, including the installation of the first heli hydrant in San Diego County. And whereas Tom Kennedy's leadership has helped to build the district into an innovative organization it is today, which was recognized by CSDA when they selected the Rapid Aerial Water Supply Project as its innovative project of the year in 2022. And whereas Tom Kennedy identified, organized, and helped lead the initiative to provide Rainbow Municipal Water District ratepayers with more affordable water, culminating in the approval of the San Diego LAFCO to allow the ratepayers to vote on detaching from the San Diego County Water Authority as its wholesale supplier and purchasing district's water from the Eastern Municipal Water District in Riverside County. And whereas Tom Kennedy has distinguished himself and the district as a true leader in the water industry on local, regional, and statewide level. And whereas Tom Kennedy will retire from the district on October 4th, 2023, after 9 years of dedicated service. And whereas Tom Kennedy's service and dedication to the district is deeply appreciated by the board and staff members of the Rainbow Municipal Water District. Now, and therefore it hereby is resolved, determined, and ordered that the board of directors on behalf of the ratepayer of the Rainbow Municipal Water District hereby commends Tom Kennedy and thanks him for his outstanding service and efforts on behalf of the district. Passed and adopted at the regular Board of Directors of Rainbow Municipal Water District held on the 26th day of September 2023 by the following vote to wit.
Well, it hasn't passed yet, so, you know.
Yes. And this requires a roll call vote, is that correct? No,
Resolution.
it doesn't?
Yep.
The resolution, I'm sorry, okay. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Hi.
No,
We need a motion.
oh, sorry. Well, I like the vote first.
I mean, we.
Get you out of
I
here.
just want to make sure the procedure's done right.
I second.
Moved by Director Gasca, second by Director Johnson. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? No absence or abstentions. Tom, we want to thank you for that and in recognition of that.
Oh.
Oh, boy.
Your thing and we want
Oh.
a picture.
Oh,
of posterity.
Posterity thing. There to there.
Is that one of our first use
Yeah.
of the new logo?
I
Yeah.
tried to use it in a presentation and they told me I couldn't.
Now you know why.
This is awesome. I appreciate it. I had got one when I left the city of Vernon in 1999. It was much smaller and it also referred to me as the poop guru. Back then. I have that. It's at home now. It used to be in my office. Well, I appreciate the kind thoughts and this thing with a flag is an amazing surprise. I texted my wife and she says, "Oh, I knew." I'm like, "What the heck?" And so it's really been my honor and the highlight of my career. I think I've been preparing for this role for a long time. You know, I had my master's in public administration for 14 years before I finally became a GM, but learned a lot from a lot of the people I've worked for and over many years, counselors I've worked side by side with over the years. And so it's been my honor to come here every day. And I did give it my all. And sometimes I have crazy ideas. Not all of them work, but you know, you miss every shot you don't take. And I think that the number one thing is the great team we have here. I've been lucky enough to convince some of them to come over here. The different managers that are here and other staff members that make a huge difference in what I'm able to do. So I just want to thank everybody. This is awesome. This one's going on the wall at home for sure. Sherry can't put this one. She's got some ideas on something.
She has a vested interest in that one.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Tom.
Item number 24, board members request for authorization to attend upcoming meetings and conferences or seminars.
I got something different.
Huh?
Number 24 says approval resolution 2325 established check signing.
That's
authority.
25.
You're on
25.
25, Nick.
24.
Oh, it says 24 here.
I hear
And
you.
the check approval is 25.
I clicked on 20.
Oh, that one doesn't have
Have
an
an
item.
item on it.
24 on
Yeah,
your
the
board
request.
effect.
Okay.
There's no
Oh,
document
You have
with it,
something
so
in.
it goes to the next one.
I did.
got it. Okay,
I don't know why I didn't.
okay.
Okay.
Got
I
it. Sorry.
I would like several of the board members to consider that we could visit Skinner Water Treatment Plant as well as Lake
Skinner.
Bell.
I think your new general manager knows some folks up there.
Well, that's why I was looking at him, sir.
We would like you to see if you can arrange it at sometime in an appropriate near future. A visit.
Another road trip. And I believe Flint Nelson and any other volunteers on engineering operations, as well as all the other, that we do open to volunteers that if they would like to come. Because that's where they also can see what we're talking about in those
Good.
committees.
Should we consider a sign up of interested parties to see if it'd be worthwhile chartering a small minibus or something
You
to?
just read my mind. I'm coordinating logistics in my head, right?
Jake, in the past, we've had these trips and we've had volunteers come, and it really means a lot to them because then they also feel part of
Of the district.
of our district. They see places that we're discussing and it gives them value. And I strongly encourage volunteers to be included as well.
How much time would normally be involved in the plant tour?
For the Skinner tour, you're probably looking at a few hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
8 hours, 4 hours.
So if we made a day trip out of it, we could leave early in the morning, do Skinner and hit do a drive around Diamond Lake or something.
Ooh,
Oh, DVL or you want to go Vail?
Vale.
Vale.
Vail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Vail, Vail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and there's not as much to see. It's not-
Yeah.
But it's a good, that'd be a good.
day trip.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, item number 25.
These are the
Consent
consent.
calendar
Yeah,
items.
all three
20,
ones.
25, 26, and 27 are all consent items. It's approval of resolution 2325 to establish check signing authority. 26 is acceptance of infrastructure for Rice Canyon Tank Transmission Main by Cass
Yes.
Ariada on behalf of the Tri Point Homes. Were you trying to keep track of their naming?
Always, always.
Rolling. And item number 27, notice of completion and acceptance of infrastructure for the Rainbow Water Quality Improvement Project, Water Main and Service Relocation Project by Arquise Construction, Division 5.
So this, will you get a motion for all three?
Three.
But if somebody wants to pull one, let us know, then we can move on the other.
I move a motion to approve all three.
Moved by Director
Second.
Johnson, seconded by Townsend Smith. Was that correct?
Yep.
You second?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Board information item, receive and file and financial items. Any comments?
Anybody have anything to add to the reports from the staff level? Oh, looks like Carleen does.
We're having our employee health fair next Tuesday. And we are having on-site flu shots. We have some spots available. So if any board members are interested in coming to the district and having your flu shot done while they're here, please let me know after the meeting. We'll put your name on the
What's
list.
the date?
Tuesday, is it the 3rd?
Third.
It's the third.
October 3rd?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you for doing that.
thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anything from finance? I noticed Tracy isn't here, or is she online?
She's online, but she's in the other room.
Okay. List of suggested agenda items for the next regular board meeting, which will be December 3rd or so.
No, we have the October meeting.
Oh, October. I'm sorry. I'm really rushing the calendar.
You realize.
Okay.
I don't know if this would be appropriate. In several of the interviews for GM, one topic continued to come up, and that was the possibility of looking into recycling water. I don't have that expertise, but maybe start it either in engineering and operations or
We went through
We
that
went through it.
process in
We
some
did.
detail twice.
2019.
what,
Yeah,
okay,
and then once before then, it fails to pencil for some of the same reasons.
okay. All right, thank you. Then it's fine. It's just that it had.
We can
come
get
up
you the
in
I'll see if I
interviews.
can find you the report.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Okay.
Thank you. I
There
appreciate it.
should be in Board Effect.
Okay,
Could be, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Does you get all the back?
Don's backfilled most of
Oh,
the
okay.
Board of Directors meetings. and things.
But not the Dudek study, I think. you have
The
to take your office.
administrative code is in there, but we do have the record retention IDM files for researching all the agenda packets and things like that.
if I
I
could
thought
just
the-
get that,
Yeah, we can get.
I can get that'd be
The
great.
board package
Because that
going
just
back-
came
Not
up in
that
some
far
of the
back.
interviews.
I think when you get really down to it, our wastewater volumes are very small. And so the
Yeah.
same scale
Yeah.
issue becomes an issue. I think
Got
if
it.
we're doing something with our wastewater stuff, it would be in conjunction with the city of Oceanside and DPR rigs. There,
Yeah.
those are,
2021 about, we did an extensive study with FPUD to buy their.
oh, we looked at
accessible
it. a
recycling
couple
Okay.
times, And it just
Yeah.
never pencils.
It does not even.
And it pencils worse with Eastern. Let's just put it.
Yeah.
that way.
Well, I appreciate that because it was something that was brought up during the GM interviews and
Yeah.
I didn't know that we had done
Yeah.
something. So thank you.
I mean, it's
And we also own a portion of the Oceanside Waste Treatment.
Okay,
Right.
perfect.
all the wastewater generated here at some point will be recovered in one way or another.
Okay.
But it's more likely that it's done at the city of Oceanside plant and project
Okay.
in the future, but not a standalone. thing. Because the state's gonna outlaw ocean discharge at some point. I mean,
Thank you, Flint.
Thank you.
Thanks. Lynn.
see you, Flint.
Any other, we're not going to put recycling water on the agenda?
No, no.
Jake can
Yeah,
get
you-
her the-
What-
Look at, don't look at me
Yeah.
for the agenda. It ain't my agenda.
Just give me, just give me what had happened
Yeah.
and I can read through that.
Where's my, it's Jake's
Yeah.
problem button. Where is it?
Well, no, that's it for me.
Yeah,
So-
Jake needs to be furiously taking notes now. not-
I believe Tracy's not on there. I believe Tracy has many financial items to come to the board.
Yeah,
this month.
Yes.
Next
Yeah.
month? Okay,
Next
Things
month's
cool.
big.
like that, And there's.
yeah.
Okay. Good. Well,
Okay.
in that case, we're adjourned.
Congratulations,
Yeah.
Tom Kennedy,
Congratulations. This was the real.
and
start.
welcome, Jake.
I texted my wife, said, hey, I got this thing. And she's like, I know.